My name is Kate, and I am 35 years old. I work as a caregiver while managing our household. My husband, who is the same age as me, was a high school classmate. We reconnected at a reunion, and our friendship quickly turned into a romance. We married soon after. Even though we don't have children, our life together is fulfilling. However, my relationship with my in-laws has always been strained, especially with my sister-in-law, Susan. Since the beginning of my marriage, she has constantly antagonized me. "Don't touch anything with those hands that take care of drooling old people," she would often say, her tone dripping with disdain. She'd mock my job and my income, saying I was only paying the price for neglecting my studies. Despite her taunts, I love my job. Caregiving isn't glamorous, but it's deeply fulfilling. There are moments when families express their gratitude, moments that make the hard work worth it. I still remember the granddaughter of an elderly woman I once cared for telling me, "Thanks to you, we were able to cherish our grandmother till the end." That single moment gave me the strength to continue, even when things got tough. Unfortunately, Susan never understood this. Every time she insulted me, my husband would defend me. He'd stand by my side, but Susan would always dismiss him. Her words would sting, but for the sake of family peace, we tried to limit our visits to just a few times a year. One day we heard the news. Susan was getting married. Her parents were thrilled, praising her fiancé's impeccable background. The wedding was to be a grand event, held at a luxurious hotel. Despite everything, my husband and I decided to attend and congratulate them wholeheartedly. The day of the wedding arrived, and everything seemed perfect. I dressed carefully in a moss green dress, and my husband reassured me with a smile, "You look beautiful." I felt hopeful. Maybe today would be different. But as we arrived at the venue, it became clear that we had missed an important family introduction. My in-laws glared at us, accusing us of being late. No matter how much my husband tried to explain, they wouldn't listen. After freshening up, I ran into Susan in the hallway. She looked stunning in her wedding dress, but greeted me with a sneer. "Why did you come?" she asked coldly. "You're out of place here." Her words stung, but I tried to stay calm. I told her I was there to celebrate her day, but she only mocked me further. Later, just before the reception, a staff member approached me. "The bride wishes to speak with you," they said. Confused, but not wanting to cause a scene, I followed them to Susan's dressing room. When I entered, Susan glared at me. "You need to leave now," she demanded. Before I could react, she picked up a vase filled with water and flowers and threw it at me. The cold water hit my face, and I fell to the ground, stunned. Susan looked down at me, her smile twisted with satisfaction. "A dirty sister-in-law like you can become clean with this," she said, her voice dripping with malice. Suddenly the door burst open. Susan's fiancé stood there, holding a bouquet of red roses, his face a mix of confusion and anger. He rushed over to me, helping me up. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Susan tried to lie, but he wasn't having any of it. He revealed a hidden camera he'd set up for a surprise proposal, one that had captured everything. The room fell silent. Susan's face turned pale as her fiancé played back the footage. "I never imagined you were like this," he said coldly. "We'll discuss what happens next later." With that, he walked out, leaving Susan trembling in shock. My husband and in-laws soon arrived, alerted by the commotion. My husband rushed to my side, furious at what had happened. The video was played for everyone, and my in-laws were left speechless. My husband turned to them, his voice steady but firm. "I cannot allow my wife to continue being treated this way. We need some distance from now on." We left the venue hand in hand. The reception went on, but not for long. Eventually, the wedding was canceled, and Susan's fiancé announced their separation. She blamed me for everything, but I felt no sympathy. Her actions had finally caught up with her. Later, as my husband and I settled back into our life, I asked him if he felt sad about distancing from his family. He looked at me, his eyes filled with warmth. "What are you talking about? I have you, and soon we'll have more family. He gently placed a hand on my belly, and I smiled, feeling hopeful for the future we'd build together, a future filled with love and respect. The weeks that followed the wedding were a whirlwind of emotions. Susan's outburst and the events of that day left a lasting impact. The news of the wedding's cancellation spread like wildfire through the community. Everyone had their opinions, but my husband and I chose to focus on our life together rather than dwell on the gossip. We needed to put the negativity behind us and start fresh. I had always found comfort in my work. The caregiving center, filled with elderly people who needed love and support, was my haven. It was a place where I could forget the hurtful words and find solace in the smiles of those I cared for. After what happened at the wedding, going back to work was just what I needed. My colleagues were supportive, and even though they had heard about the incident, they didn't pry. Instead, they showed kindness in the small things, offering to cover a shift or simply being there to chat during breaks. One afternoon, as I was helping one of the elderly residents, Mrs. Thompson, she looked up at me and said, "Kate, you have such a kind heart. You're always so gentle with us. It's people like you who make this world a better place." Her words brought tears to my eyes. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that until that moment. It reminded me that no matter what Susan or anyone else thought of my work, I was making a difference. Meanwhile, my husband, Michael, was also adjusting. He was still upset with how his parents had handled everything. We had agreed to keep some distance, but I could see that it weighed heavily on him. Michael had always been close to his parents, and distancing himself was not an easy decision. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, I asked, "Do you think you'll ever talk to them again?" He paused, then nodded slowly. "Maybe one day, but not until they understand that you deserve respect. You are my family, Kate, and I won't let anyone treat you otherwise." His words were firm, and I knew he meant every single one of them. Susan, on the other hand, had fallen into a spiral. After the wedding was called off, her once perfect image began to crack. She blamed me for everything, spreading rumors and trying to paint herself as the victim. But the video evidence her ex-fiancé had shared made it hard for anyone to believe her lies. She lost her job at the multinational company she had been so proud of. Her employers couldn't overlook her behavior, especially after the footage surfaced online. People who once admired Susan began to see a different side of her, a side that was manipulative and cruel. Despite everything, I didn't feel any satisfaction in Susan's downfall. If anything, I felt a sense of pity. She had always been the favorite, the one who could do no wrong, but it seemed that the pedestal she had been placed on had done her more harm than good. It had blinded her to the reality of her actions and their consequences. She had never learned humility or compassion, and now it was costing her dearly. One morning, about a month after the wedding, Michael and I received a letter from his parents. It was handwritten, the edges slightly crumpled, as if it had been held and reconsidered multiple times before being sent. In the letter, they expressed regret for how they had handled things. They didn't outright apologize for Susan's behavior, but they did acknowledge that they had been unfair to us. They wanted to meet, to talk things through. Michael read the letter aloud, and when he finished, he looked at me, his expression unreadable. "What do you think?" he asked. I thought about it for a moment. "I think they're trying in their own way. Maybe we could meet them halfway," I suggested. Michael nodded, though I could see the hesitation in his eyes. "Maybe," he replied. We decided to take our time, not rushing into anything until we were both ready. As the weeks turned into months, life began to settle. The cold winter gave way to the warmth of spring, and with it came new beginnings. My pregnancy was progressing well, and each day brought a mix of excitement and nervousness. Michael was overjoyed at the thought of becoming a father. He'd spend hours talking to my growing belly, making promises to our baby about the adventures they'd have together. It was moments like these that made all the hardships we had faced worth it. One afternoon, we decided to visit the park where we had reconnected years ago. It was a place filled with memories, of laughter, of first confessions, of the beginning of our journey together. We sat on a bench, watching children play and families enjoy their time together. Michael took my hand in his and said, "This is what it's all about, isn't it? Building a life together, creating memories, and holding on to the good moments." I nodded, tears welling in my eyes. "Yes, it is," I whispered. As we sat there, I realized that the events of the past year had only made us stronger. We had faced betrayal, cruelty, and loss, but we had also found love, loyalty, and hope. Susan's actions had hurt us, but they had also brought Michael and me closer. We had learned to stand up for each other, to protect what mattered most, our love and our future. Eventually, Michael decided to reach out to his parents. We arranged to meet them at a small cafe in town. I was nervous, unsure of how the conversation would go. When we arrived, his parents were already there, sitting at a corner table. They looked older, more tired than I remembered. As we approached, they stood up, and for a moment, there was an awkward silence. Then, Michael's mother stepped forward and hugged him tightly. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. Michael hugged her back, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I know, Mom," he replied. The conversation that followed was difficult, filled with pauses and unspoken words. They apologized, not just to Michael but to me as well. They admitted that they had been blind to Susan's flaws, that they had put her on a pedestal without considering the consequences. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation, but it was a start. And for now, that was enough. As we left the cafe, Michael took my hand in his, and I knew that we were going to be okay. Life wasn't perfect, and it never would be, but we had each other. And soon we would have a little one to share our love with. The day our baby was born was the happiest day of our lives. Michael held our daughter in his arms, his eyes filled with wonder. "She's perfect," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I smiled, exhausted, but overjoyed. "She is," I agreed. In that moment, everything else faded away. The hurt, the anger, the pain. All that mattered was the love we felt for our child and for each other. We named her Grace, a reminder of everything we had been through and the strength we had found along the way. As I looked at her tiny face, I knew that our future was bright. We had faced the worst and come out stronger. And now it was time to build a life filled with love, laughter, and grace. Our journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. And as I looked at Michael, holding our daughter, I knew that we were exactly where we were meant to be, together, as a family, ready to face whatever came next.